this is not a public hearing, it's a public information meeting. So we'd like to begin. Does everyone in the back hear me?
Perfectly.
Perfect. I always say that, and everyone always says yes. I'm waiting for somebody to go, huh? So, let's make sure this works. It was working before.
That's for the planning board.
So my name is Ben Simon. I'm the vice president here at Laberge Group.
Are you
Kathy
serious?
and Rooney's our local government
We should have a
specialists.
signage.
This is about our 15th or 16th government reorganization process. We are one of the 2 firms in the state that specialize in working with communities as yours, looking at how to reorganize a government from a village to a town or consolidation of shared services. Up here are just a few of the ones that we have worked with and developed and also administered some of the implementation. Most recently, a few weeks back, March 12th, the village of Wolcott in Wayne County voted not to dissolve, so that stopped their process. But December 23rd, as Wade was here a few weeks ago telling you, the village of Fort Johnson, they chose to dissolve, and that was the last day the village of Fort Johnson was in office. Now, we are a municipal consulting company specializing in engineering, planning, community development, and government, what we call government operation and government efficiency. So we're here because the village has decided, I'm sorry my little piece is not working. There we go. We're here because the village has decided that it will be wise to entertain a review and a plan, develop a plan for what would happen if the village was to dissolve. And I want to go through a few processes here. Number one is, who was here for Wade a few weeks ago? Many of you, good. So thank you for coming back. Wade's a good friend of mine. We've been working together for about 22 years, him and I've been working for 25 in the field. And he went over the fact that a dissolution plan is underneath Article 17A of the General Municipal Law. That just means not a lot to many people. New York State law allows for communities since 2010 to talk about and vote on dissolution or consolidation one of 2 ways. Either as a citizen-initiated process by referendum or as a board-initiated process by resolution. In a citizen-initiated process, you have the referendum and then you lock into a very, very, very tight time frame in New York State law, whereas 10 days to certify the petition, 30 days to actually have a meeting to call the referendum, then a vote automatically within 60 to 90 days. Very, very fast, not a lot of time to work with the public, not a lot of time to work with both entities in the village and town to figure out what could happen, not a lot of time to educate the public. The reverse is a board-initiated process, which is what we're doing here in the village. And that allows you to have the time, whatever time you think you need to take, to develop a plan, to do the research, to work with departments, to work with the village and the town, and to educate the public so when there is a vote, if there's a vote, you're able to vote with information, not with your heartstrings or your purse strings, or even worse, what you read in social media on Facebook. We've had the worst case of keyboard warriors in the town and village of Pauling, where one individual began the process by creating 5 fake profile names and focusing in on a conversation as if he was having a conversation with the public about why to get rid of the village and why to consolidate. So it was well known that there was a conversation happening amongst residents about reorganizing the town and village when really it was himself in his kitchen talking to himself. And then he created fake Facebook profiles, fake websites, fake newspapers where he interviewed me. It was wonderful. I never spoke to him, but it was a great interview. It culminated with a fake newspaper that he mailed to everybody. So that's why I'm a firm believer that if a village is going to look at reorganization, a board-initiated process allowing you to have the opportunity to, in the public, transparent, discuss the topics, look at the information, and develop a plan is a better way to go. So that's what you're working on here. The plan, though, just like in a board-initiated process, the way he told you, it's not binding by the town, because you cannot bind the New York State a future government. So all the work you're going to be doing over the next 4 to 6 months to develop a dissolution plan to vote on is not binding by the town. Only way it would be more binding is if it was a consolidation and the town could vote as well. So there is no town vote. Town residents do not get a voice. They don't go to the polls. They don't vote. It's basically the village residents decide the future of their governance structure. Should you choose to dissolve, the town is required to take over the services, at least the water and the sewer infrastructure, fire services, and the assets. And the town's also required to become the signatory of any outstanding grants or debts. They can't say, no, I don't want it. They can't say, no, I don't want your roads. In fact, in Mastic Beach was only a village for 6 years. The town highway superintendent said, I don't want their roads. I go, sir, they were your roads. He goes, no, they're the village roads. No, they were all put in by you. They were only in village 6 years. Oh, well, okay, well, I guess I have to take them. Yes, you have to take. The town has to maintain the roads, has to plow the roads, will have to provide fire service. There's always fears of what happens with water. Water will still come out of the tap. There'll be a water district created for the area formerly known as the village. Remember, in town law, the entire town does not pay for services that the entire town doesn't get. In town law, special improvement districts are created for water, for sewer, potentially for sidewalk or lighting. It's up to the town. So the entire town will not be paying for your water, and in your case, you don't pay for sewer right now. That's a DEP issue. It's not, the entire town doesn't pay that debt. Any debts that the village currently has will still be borne by the village residents, or they'll be hamlet residents. And we'll go through that through the process. So prior to the referendum, we're going to be providing information to the community on the possible conditions of the services and how would they be delivered by the town, the impact on property taxes for village and town taxpayers, what's going to happen to your assets and liabilities. We're required in a dissolution plan to list out all the village's assets, all their liabilities, and come up with a disposition plan for your assets. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be transferred to the town? Are they going to be sold at auction? Are they going to be given to the fire department? Things like that. We have to look at the potential impact for land use and zoning. You have zoning. The town does not right now. We have to work with the town to figure out what their plans are. So there are three main options for what the town can do. And we had them happen already. One is you create a hybrid zoning ordinance. If you had zoning, you pull it into yours. Two, you can have a zoning light outside the village, could be a rural ag or a residential, and then your zoning can be pulled into just the way it is today, or it can go away. So in town of Salem, they created a zoning light. The village of Salem zoning stayed in place by the town, but everywhere else in the town was just residential. In Port Henry and Mariah, town of Mariah chose not to have zoning at all for the village, so that was gone. In South Nyack and Orangetown took the South Nyack zoning, pulled it into theirs, and put an H in front of all the designations. So when there's a residential one, it became HR1. If there was a business district one, it became HB1. That way they can differentiate in their definitions in their code between the higher density requirements of the former village of South Nyack and the rest of the town of Orangetown. In Mastic Beach, I guess this is the fourth option. Town of Brookhaven had zoning for the area that became a village. The village changed zoning. When they dissolved, the town went back to their current original zoning. So there are different ways you can work on that. We'll go through that process. We also have to look at the potential impact of all laws. So the laws and ordinances in the village will stay on the books for up to 2 years. New York state law requires that it's your 2-year window, if you may, that allows you to keep your laws in place until which time the town either removes the law, changes the law, or updates the law into their own code. At the end of those 2 years, the laws are gone. And then we go through the potential plan for transfer of the employees or the elimination of positions and the date of dissolution. So your plan, your village will put in that plan the date from which they will dissolve. Doesn't mean the public's going to vote for it, just means the plan has to have a date. It's a flexible date. After 2010, in the law, they allow the communities to pick a date to dissolve. We always recommend you pick a date far enough in advance that allows you to do the job of closing down the government, not finish it in November and close down in December. So that's all part of your planning process. Now, I want to let you guys know that this is the beginning, and at the beginning of any reorganization plan, Kathleen and I come out to the public to go over what the process is. We only began this process a few weeks ago, so we don't have the answers to many questions that came in over the weekend, but we will over as time goes through. Does everyone know there's a website, by the way? All right, so you can go to the village's website and link to it, or go to ours. It's labergegroup.com/Tannersville. But if you go to your village website, you can click on it and go right to the website. That's where all the information that we're creating will be. So any draft plans, this PowerPoint presentation, the analyses that we do throughout the process, they're there. But there's also a Q&A page, an FAQ for frequently asked questions, and a public submission of questions. So if you have questions throughout the process, you can submit a question, and within 7 or 10 days, we'll be updating it so that everyone has the same answer. This goes back to early in the processes when we didn't have it, and information is being changed online, and people swirling back and forth. So we decided to create an FAQ page so everyone has the same answers to the same questions. So I want to focus your attention to two different things. I mentioned earlier the term consolidation. There's two different ways to reorganize the government in New York State. One is dissolution, which is a government body dissolves itself and no longer exists, and the people in that community are the only ones who actually vote on it. Then there's consolidation, where the village and town consolidate. You're still getting rid of one government, but now residents in both the village and the town would have the opportunity to vote. So it's not, you no longer only one group of people saying, for lack of a better word, my son would say, peace out, drop the mic and leave. This is a situation where we work together to build a new government. So in a consolidation, the village and town boards meet together and they develop a new government. It's still going to be a town, because in New York State, a village cannot exist outside of a town. But in that case, the town can reorganize how it's formed, its board, its duties, the positions of highway superintendent can be elected or appointed instead of elected. You're developing a whole new government. You're working on that together. In a village, only the village develops the plan, only the village gets the chance to vote. So the initiation process I mentioned is already a board-initiated process, but as Wade said a few weeks ago, prior to 2010, 39 villages have been dissolved. Since 2010, 23 have already dissolved. So there's been a big uptick in the process since 2010. I know Wade said about 50-50, but it's 23 chose to dissolve and 31 chose not to dissolve in that time. So a little bit more on the voting not to dissolve. There's not one, I know someone's already said he disagrees with me, but that's okay. This is our 15th study, so we kind of understand that there's not any one uniform reason why people go through this. I've had a situation where I had a gentleman who living at home, he decided that he didn't want to have more government, he started the process. I had one situation where a guy had a two-family house in the village and was cited by the code enforcer for snow on his sidewalks. He said, I don't need a village, I'm getting rid of the village. I had 3 occasions where a person ran for mayor and lost and decided to dissolve the village. There's just as many reasons as you have people, the reasons why you do it. Whether it's taxes, whether it's personalities, whether it's you used to believe in layers of government, or whether it's a citizen empowerment tax credit. There's so many reasons why you begin the process. But where we are is we're at the beginning. We just started, we were hired a few weeks ago. We just met with the village, some members of the village board over the last week and department heads over the last week. We're beginning to meet with the town. We have a very intensive data collection process that I'm sorry you have to provide information on in your so-called spare time. But we have to basically understand how your government works, from the services delivery process to all the financials, and then figure out how the town works and what they're doing with services and financials. Look at the employees and the ability to provide those services, and then work with the town to get an understanding of how they would think about providing those services in the future if the village was to dissolve. Meaning that in most cases, when we start the process, towns do not have the people or the resources to provide services that village provide. So we have to figure out how would they get that. Would there be a transfer of the current staff over? Would there be new positions made? Would services not be provided? What does that mean? And then, for example, in Walcott, I'll use them from a few weeks ago, was one village, 2 towns. So we had to figure out what each town was going to provide. The village provided sidewalk snow removal. They provided brush pickup. They did heavy appliance pickup. They did leaf vacuuming in the fall. The towns didn't do that. So the town had to figure out what would the village be losing if they dissolved, and which town would do what. In their case, one town said, I'll do it, one town said, I wouldn't. So you had, in their case, you had a situation where water and sewer infrastructure were in 2 towns. So they had to figure out who would own it, how it would be served, and who would provide it. End of the day, the village chose not to dissolve, but that's all the kind of things we have to work through. We also have to work through your DEP agreement, and what would happen to your sewer. Would they continue to provide sewer, own sewer, and provide it to you free of charge? Or there be additional resources being placed on you. Water, we have to figure out how the town provide the water. Right now, there's a water rate in the village and a water rate in town. How would that continue? How would that be equalized? A lot of questions we have to figure out as we go through this process. So right now, we're in studying the impacts. Over the next few months, we'll ask those questions and develop a study document, and draft it, and provide it back to the village board and make it public. Then from there, the village board has to endorse the plan to go to public hearing. Once it goes to public hearing, the village board can then decide whether or not it actually makes sense or sense. Sense with an S or sense with a C, and then you decide in a village board initiated process if it's going to go to referendum, and then you pick the date for referendum and go forward. If you have a referendum and you hold the referendum and the village residents vote not to dissolve, it's dead for 4 years. Can't be brought up again for 4 more years. If they vote to dissolve, well, then you move through the process that's laid out in the plan. So it's a little bit different than a citizen-initiated process. In a citizen-initiated process, you have the referendum, and if you vote to dissolve, then you develop the plan. So you don't have any real information before the plan except for an interim study that gives an idea of what would happen. So in a citizen-initiated process, what you didn't do, it's petition, vote, then plan. Here it's, you're working on the plan, then you get to vote on the plan.
What if the board decides to not go with the referendum?
Then there's no vote.
Period.
Yeah. No vote.
Okay,
It's done.
You can, no, there's no vote, it's not done. The citizens can still do a petition,
right, okay.
but it's not, there's no vote. So we mentioned this before, that one size doesn't fit all. Now, what we're gonna be doing is we have a process we're going through to get the information, but development of a dissolution plan is very village specific. No other village that we work with has a DEP. So there are things like that we have that are unique to you. Others have land use, others have law enforcement that you don't have. So there's a lot of different things that we have to work through, but what we're looking at here is making sure that your input at the village level and town stakeholders is in the plan. We want to make sure that we develop a plan, a dissolution plan that safeguards your community identity, which is your land use and your services. We want to look at your transition strategies. How will we create the taxation districts? In other words, we probably mentioned this to you, but villages were created for the sole purpose of providing higher level of services that people outside of villages don't have. Normally, that's infrastructure. Historically, that's water and sewer, lighting, ditches, and sidewalks. Historically, villages were created on economic trade routes, either trains or cars because of tourist areas. They were created where a more dense land use was present, and services were needed by that densified, if you like that word, population. So the water, the sewer, the lighting, and the sidewalks happened in villages more than more rural suburban towns. So because of town law, you won't have just water to everybody. It's water in districts. You can create more districts, but your village will be created as a district. Your sewer will be created as a district. The town has to make a decision on sidewalk, lighting, and drainage, but that's for another conversation as we go through the process. We have to look at your employees. Will the town need employees to provide the same services you have today? And if so, what will be the method for transitioning employees over? We have to look at maintaining your priority services and look at your fire. Well, you have a joint fire district, so it's different for you. But other villages, we've done this. The village has a fire company and towns don't. Towns have fire protection districts, and then we have to figure out what are the options for still providing fire services. In your case, nothing changes because you have a joint fire district. Then we have to make sure that we incorporate input from the public engagement process. So in our original, normally we have a beginning and an ending meeting, one at the beginning of the process and one once the plan is done. We're going to hold a virtual one in about a month or two, so anybody that's here, anybody that has a second home, can ask questions online. So we'll just host one from my office. It'll be a Q&A session. So as we develop more information, we'll have more answers, but people can all hop on in the middle of the plan, ask questions versus waiting until all the way at the end to ask those questions. So we understand that whenever you're dealing with a community, there's a number of scary issues, things that cause pause, if you may. From community identity to representation, you're a village of 560 odd folks, not odd people, just odd numbers. You have 560 people, and you have a board you directly vote for. Now you have a town, you dissolve, and you have less of a representation on the town board than you would have one man, one vote, but the percentage value is different. We're looking at that. We have to make sure that we identify for you your services and in what ways they can be continued, and the fiscal impact to the Tannersville resident. There's also impact to the town, but for the purposes of your vote, you want to see how it affects you individually. And that'll all be part of your plan. We do this, though, in a way that intertwines the concept of dissolution with empathy for the employees, because you're all working for this community, regardless of the plan. So, Robin's 60 hours a week has nothing to do with this. This now has another 10 or 20, and you're concerned with what would happen with your job. The same with the DPW, what happens to their jobs, and the water folks, what happens to their jobs. So we approach this with empathy and understanding for you and your family, that we're not here to cause anyone to say, we're cutting you, you're done. You know, we're not those guys that come in on Friday with the briefcases and the hatchet and the red slip. We're here to figure out what would the process look like for you in the future, and how would that be transitioned into a town government. But we do this understanding we take into account your services, your public, your history, your identity, your requirements of the state, and we look at transition planning. Should the village residents vote to dissolve, how would that transition over the period of time into the town government? And what does that mean for the services? For example, highway services. You know, we would recommend that there be an intermunicipal agreement between the town and the village, so that you transition earlier, so you're able to, if you are going to be selling off any of your snow plows or assets or highway garage or the like, you have the ability to do so and still maintain those services. We want to make sure that there's a pathway for the residents, for the employees to go into the town government if that's how you move forward. So how are we going to communicate with you all? We're going to have 3 meetings, I mentioned. This is the first, an online second, and a public one, which may need a larger room at that point. We're also going to have the Q&A. You send us your questions. And the last one is we're going to give you, if you choose to move forward towards a referendum, a pre-referendum brochure that you're going to be able to review and in turn at your own house look at the pros and cons. So when you go into the voting booth, you'll be able to make those decisions. In addition, it's very hard to see here, and I thoroughly apologize. It was easy on my screen at home. It does say in deep, deep blue, labergegroup.com/Tannersville. But again, off the village's website, you'll be able to link to us as well. And in our data collection process, the work sessions, we'll be communicating with the village and town leadership. We're going to be conducting the interviews with the village and town boards, as well as all the department heads. We're going to have subject matter work groups with the people that provide the services at the village and town, see how those services will be meshed together. We'll identify those key issues that we have to overcome in the dissolution and transition plan, and then we're going to be seeking input on the services and the fiscal impacts from those that are creating your budgets and also from the state. So far, for our progress to date, we held an initial kickoff, was it 2 weeks ago? We already started meeting with the village and town staff. The village staff, town staff is next 2 weeks. We have the website. We have the first 25 questions received, so we'll be going through those to update them as we go on. I've never gotten 25 emails on a Sunday before, but we have them, and we'll be updating those with information as we have them. We've interviewed some department heads already: the clerk, treasurer, highway superintendent, the water operator, the engineer, fire commissioner, the ZBA, and we will be talking to the village justice, I believe, tomorrow. And then we're going to be setting up interviews with the town as well in their departments. And then when we have a base of information from both the village and towns, we'll start working through those sub-work groups to be able to identify the key issues and move you through the process. Now, the things that are beginning to come up though already are the representation and voice in government. That's one issue that's beginning to percolate to the top. Village identity is very important to the residents. That's percolating up. The critical services for water and water rates, DEP sewer contracts, public works, so the snow plowing, the sidewalks and public lots, who, how, and with what. Obviously, village services have different personnel dedicated to the village right now, and different sites equipment dedicated right now. Fire services and code enforcement is an issue that we have to identify. We also want to look at and continue to focus on the grants. I don't know how many people understand the hard work that the village board's already been undertaking over the past few years, but you have been very successful in securing funding. One of the big questions that always comes up in a dissolution is, what happens to my grant? Nothing. It transfers to the town. By New York State law, all contracts, all accounts, all executable documents and agreements with the state get re-executed by the town supervisor. So your DRI, $10 million, of which some goes to the village for village projects, gets re-signed, re-executed by the town supervisor. All the grants, the lakefront beach improvement, that gets redone, the new grant from the Department of State you're getting, that gets re-signed by the town. You also have some focus on your village parks and public spaces. The town doesn't have parks and public spaces, so how would they be able to maintain these parks and public spaces? That's an issue that's come up. And also the continued investment that's already happening in your water system, and what's the town's plans to move forward on that. And again, we can talk with the town, and most towns have been very, very forthcoming with their information, but it's still not binding. So we have to make sure that we get as much good information and buy-in as we can for the development of your plan. And then finally, your village zoning and other quality of life ordinances. We'll be working with your attorney and the town attorney to see what are similar, what has to get repealed, what has to get restructured. For example, in most communities, the Main Street is a state route, which means most communities, the villages, have already petitioned by letter, not by petition, that there be a speed limit that's reduced inside of the village. Well, when the village no longer exists, after 2 years, that goes away. It goes to a highway speed limit. So the town would have to do the same thing. So the village has this all. We're now requesting that DOT on a state route continue the 30 miles per hour in the village kind of a thing. Just little things that come up in a process that people don't think about. We have lots of stories, but I don't have time to go over all the things that we've uncovered over the years. For example, a village who thought that they owned the village hall didn't own the village hall. So the town came in to put town offices in the village hall. They were told they can't because they didn't own it. So there was actually a situation where it was left to a trust, and the village board was the trustees of the trust. And so the trust owned it, not the village. So the town had to go down to New York City, basically, and go through a process in court approving it. And then the surviving entity, it will now be named the trustees, so they can actually have access to the village hall, which then became a town hall. So there's something unique in the 2010 statute, and Wade probably went through it, the Citizen Empowerment Tax Credit, CETC. So New York State Governor Cuomo at the time created a carrot, if you may, for communities to look at reorganization. And that carrot was an annual grant equal to 15% of the joint tax levy. So in your case, currently, the 23-24 village tax levy is about $447,000. The town was about $2.75 million. So combined, if you take 15%, the state would be providing September 15th every year in the year following dissolution a wired grant to the town of roughly today $480,000. So based on this alone, nothing to do with the water rates, nothing to do with sewer rates or other costs, just simply on tax levy, the state will be giving the town more money than the village actually raises in their tax levy today. But what does it actually mean? It does not go back to you. Even though you dissolve, and because of your process, you had the CETCs coming, the village or hamlet does not get that money. The entire town gets that money. It comes off the town tax levy. So when you get a town tax bill in January, it gives you the levy and tells you how much you have to pay based on your assessed value. Well, thanks to the law, it also then had this amount reduced by X amount of dollars, thanks to Governor Hochul and the Citizen Empowerment Tax Credit. So you get that little announcement at the bottom of your tax bill. Everybody in town gets that. So if the town tax levy is $2.75 million, in today's, they call it 2.8 from easy math, and you get 480, take 480 off, you'll be 2.3. You'll be lowering the entire tax levy. So of that CETC, something kind of unique in it. Law requires 70% of it have to go to lower your taxes. So of that 480, 336,000 have to go to lower town taxes. That's your tax and town tax by law. The other 30% is up to the town. They can either throw the whole thing in and give the whole 480 towards tax reduction, or they can do the 336 and use the other 144, 145,000 for other town-wide services, whether it be in the village, in the hamlet, or anywhere in the community. You can get the other 144. And I say this because a lot of people think that, hey, we did it, we dissolved, why don't we get it? Well, you're not an entity anymore. If you dissolve, there is no village government. You're a hamlet, the town gets it. Now they can decide to use 70% to lower all taxes by law, but they could take the other 30% and put it into your sidewalks and your parks. They could decide to use the other 144 to buy equipment to service you guys. They can put it towards your Christmas lights and wreaths, so they can put it towards your banners, they can put it towards sidewalk repair, they can put it towards a new Bobcat, they can put it anywhere but water and sewer. They cannot put it into a special district. So that's just so you know, that is available. And in a dissolution, you, as a village board, won't be here, so you don't have a say. It's all your elected officials at the town level. I keep pressing the button like I think something's going to change. So where do we go from here? Well, we have a second information meeting in May or June, probably early June, and that's the one that's going to be online. Then we'll get a plan to the board roughly July. Then the village board can vote on the endorsement, and it's really the public hearing, but in July. We'll have a third public information as the public hearing in August, September. And then we can make any revisions that come out of those meetings, come out of those hearings. Then they have to, then if they choose to move forward with the referendum, it'll be in late fall. There'll be a 60-day time frame and publishing of the, there'll be a document available, and publishing of the announcement for 4 weeks in a row, and you have your vote. The question of the vote is, there isn't a magic number per se. There isn't, if I get 210 votes, I win or lose. It's one more person, it's plurality, you win or lose by one vote. So if one more person votes to dissolve, you dissolve. If one less person votes to dissolve, meaning it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. It's an election up, down. There's only going to be one question on that ballot. Shall the village of Tannersville dissolve? Yes or no? That's the only question on the ballot. And it'll be run in the same way all the other village elections are run. So what you should know about the process is, while Article 17A calls for the village to develop a plan, I keep mentioning this, that it's really, it's not, the town is not bound by the plan. It really is, though, a town plan. Because the town has to work with us to tell us how they're going to provide those services. It's kind of a challenge. They don't own it. It's not their plan. They don't vote on it, but we need their input so you know what you're voting on. So that's why Wade probably said that village dissolution is a town issue, not a village issue. It's true. I just gave a whole presentation on that in New York City back in February. It requires us to collaborate with the town. In every single reorganizational plan we've done, the town has been an active participant in the committee, in the subcommittee, or working groups, providing information, except for one. One of them, the only way I got information is by coming to a board meeting 3 hours away and asking questions. Not a good way to encourage participation or trust in a community if you can't actually cooperate. So every town that we work with has cooperated. Again, they're not obligated to, but they do that because they understand that you're their residents as well. And should you vote to dissolve, they're the ones that are going to be responsible for overseeing and providing the services. So they want to make sure they're involved in some of the information going back to you all. The town role, again, is the voters do not have a vote. Town voters do not have a voice. They don't vote. It's key to understanding that. People come to us often, can I vote? Are you a village resident? No, no. But I have to take over. Yep, you have no say. You do not get a chance to vote if you're not a village resident. Only people that are registered to vote in the village can vote. Not just because you own property does not make you a village resident. Just because you own property doesn't give you the automatic right to vote in that election unless you have certified that this is your home for the purposes of residency and this is where you vote. Plan development. We're going to be working through this process here. The town will be responsible for managing all new obligations. So we have to understand from them, how are they going to do the plowing? How are they going to do the roads? How are they going to do streetlights and water and parking, sidewalk? So that's part of the process that we're going to be working on, how they're going to provide or oversee their new obligations. What staffing are they going to have to add? And the plan is all going to be transparent. In the plan will be the documents that shows you the shift from village taxpayers to town taxpayers, the costs going from the left side of the ledger to the right side, the staff going from any positions going from the village to the town. We're going to talk about them, but you have to understand that we have to understand from you all, post-dissolution service provision, governance structures, local laws and taxation. That's what we have to do and give you a realistic plan. While it's not binding, it's not cut in stone. Only thing cut in stone in the plan, by the way, is the date of dissolution. We want to make sure you're comfortable that the information is factual, it was based in an unbiased research, and it was an opportunity for you to see this is what could happen. So when you vote, you have knowledge to vote on. If the vote's no, again, it won't take place for 4 more years. When I say for 4 more years, it's at least 4 years. You cannot bring it back to 4 years. Unless there is no referendum, tomorrow they can serve a petition. That means you're still a village all the way through. So if you have a date of dissolution and it's 12/31/25, you still have elections to run. You're still running your village until that day. It doesn't mean you don't have elections. It doesn't mean you stop providing services. You're required to provide the services that are of a village, but the day that you're no longer a village. The next day, the town takes over, which is why our plans have transition plans in place to begin moving those services earlier so there's not a catastrophe on day one. Also, if you vote no, and I mentioned before, there's no you can still bring up a dissolution. If you vote no, you cannot bring it up again, but you can bring up consolidation. If the village chooses, the board chooses not to have a vote, then you can still do a dissolution by petition. I mentioned this before because consolidation is a different way of looking at it, but it's not a dissolution. So if you vote no to dissolve, the residents of the village and the residents of the town can still bring forth a petition to consolidate. It's almost the same process, but now both village and town voters get a say in the matter, and both men will have a vote. So just so you understand, even if you vote no to dissolve, doesn't mean it cannot come back as a consolidation. If the vote is yes, dissolution will occur on the date in the actual plan. You'll wind down operations, you'll transfer your properties to the town, you'll sell whatever assets they don't want to buy, meaning, computers and buildings and equipment, vehicles will be bought. You'll arrange for the necessary staffing all the way through. The town's going to take steps to ramp up their operations. So during that time period of the date of the vote and date that the village ends, they now have to begin the process of developing a new town budget, developing the staffing, either by transferring your employees over or by putting out civil service requests and building up their staffing. They're going to have to determine the equipment they need to provide the same level of services you have today. That may be purchasing your equipment or maybe purchasing new equipment. They'll have to create all the special districts that they decide they need. Obviously, you have some water and sewer, but if they decide they want to have lighting and sidewalk, they can do that as well. They can start that process. The town and village should, during the transition, cooperate for the smooth transition, going back to the IMAs, for moving process, people, information, data across from the village to the town. So you don't need a slide. We have, and sometimes we have to limit people to 3 minutes, first come, first serve, but because you only have about 15, 20 minutes, I'm just gonna go down the road by hands. Again, we don't have information to share with you on what your tax rate's gonna be, what the cost of your assets or liabilities or indebtedness is right now. We will at the next meeting. But if you have questions on the process and what it means, I'll be happy to answer some going down this road first.
Is it fair to say if it is not dissolved, the consolidation is not a double jeopardy, so there is a chance to consolidate if the dissolution is not approved?
If the village, and as I just mentioned, if the village chooses not to dissolve, the village residents and town residents can both sign a petition to move forward towards consolidation, which will start the whole thing over again. And that, if it's petitioned, there'll be a vote for consolidation.
And it's not a double jeopardy
No.
issue with a 4-year period?
No.
It can be started all over again?
It can be started all over again as a consolidation.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else in the first row? Second row, you had your hand up.
Yeah, you don't have any answers today really as far as water debt, but.
No.
So, I just have a conceptual thing as
Okay.
far as the water debt. We have, people that use the water outside the village and inside the village. And there is currently water debt.
Mhm.
So, will the water debt go to the new district or will the water debt be restricted to the current taxpayers?
In a water district, typically the debt follows the water district. So whoever the users are in the water district will continue to pay their share of the debt.
So it won't be townwide, you'll still own your debt in the district.
So there's,
Right, but I just want to make sure that the
Yeah.
debt wouldn't be restricted to the village taxpayers' role as of today.
correct.
And then the people outside the village that are currently using the water wouldn't have to,
So there's about
depending on where the
five,
debt
so
district
there's-
is created, is it the water district or is it
So
the village or?
So it's really, the first step is it's the village's debt, so it becomes the water district's debt. So the town has to create a second district for the area that's being served outside of the village as a separate water district. Now, the town can either continue 2 districts or consolidate them both into one new district, but as of right, if you vote, your vote to dissolve is automatically voting to create a water district and a sewer district at the same boundary that you have in your village today. The area outside of the village is that, they're right now, what we call out-of-district users, or out-of-village users. The town would have to create a separate district for those people as well. And then how the town decides to apportion the debt between the two will be up to the town, or they may consolidate them both together. But as of right, the debt stays with the district that's created by the former village.
That seems to be contradictory.
Because the debt, you're gonna create a district for the
Do you
village.
think?
No, if there's a district created and the debt follows the district,
Right,
that sounds equitable.
correct.
But if you say that the current village users are going to have the debt, and the outside users are gonna be a separate district, and it's the town's decision to decide what that district is, that's 2 different things.
Well, the town has to create a district for the people outside. They
Why?
can, for the people outside this district, they're either going to be out-of-district users, and will have a rate for that, or they'll have a second water district and a rate for that. The debt for the creation of the debt you create right now as a village stays with that first water district. It will not be added on to the second one.
Right, so the debt
You don't
currently
agree.
for water users is
I
gonna be.
mean, I'm not
absorbed.
explaining myself very well. You wanna try a different one?
Yeah, I think that in most of the communities we've worked in, when there is debt and it's relative to a sewer or water district, and that current village would have relationships with properties outside the village, there's been a continued sharing of that debt. What Ben is saying is, that is typically the way it's done, but that is not necessarily in law. It says it that way.
There's no guarantee that that
Correct.
town, the
Correct.
township could say, you're not taking on any debt, the village district and the village itself will carry it all, and the town will say, we're not gonna pass anything further except to that village water district, tough luck, we decide and we can do what the heck we want, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Now, what I'm talking about is that there is a law, there's provision in the law for consolidations. So if you have to create a water district, let's just call it water district number 1. This area formerly known as the village. Okay, water district number 1. You have the debt you incurred right now, it's your debt. The area outside the village still gets, there are areas outside the village still getting water. The town would have to create a district for them, or they can continue the premise of out-of-district users. If they created a second district, water district number 2, there would be costs for O&M, operation and maintenance, and for water. In New York State law, there's an ability to consolidate both of them. And in consolidation, the debt will go across both.
To bring them both in,
There's a provision, we're not saying the town's going to do that.
But they don't have, exactly.
They don't have to.
There's no
In
requirement.
every case that we've dealt with so far, the debt stays with, in this case, water district number 1. So those that earned it, those that incurred it, those that have it will stay with you.
But in most instances, the town outside village users do pay their share of that.
Correct.
So basically, it's a
So, wait,
courtesy
let me-
thing.
Well, no, let me explain what that means. So normally, people outside of a village pay a higher rate.
Yes.
And that higher rate covers your fair share of what that debt would be. So,
And I think for clarification purposes, right now, the way the village water is done, it's not paid on property taxes, it's paid through the rates already.
okay,
So that's really what the distinction is, I think, and a little bit of the confusion. So it is in the rates now.
okay, it's in the rate, but it's not in your debt, it's in district number 1's debt. They don't have a debt. Am I wrong?
Right, but they're paying debt service on the
Through their
debt.
rate.
Well, I
Correct.
could explain to it because I did it for 25 years. So the rate, now that currently the debt is paid through, let's call all the users together. Prior to that, the village taxpayers built the plants, purchased the plants, did all the renovations, played all the co-pays, did everything to
Correct.
build the infrastructure that currently exists.
Correct.
So it's basically, if that bad scenario comes about, the users in District 2 that you just created, that are users outside the village, they're getting a free ride. They didn't build the system, they didn't make the system,
Correct.
they didn't do all these things, they didn't get all these grants, they didn't bring it to this level, and they're getting it for free along with anyone else along that.
Pretty
road.
much.
We're just, the village taxpayers, the incorporated village that built all of this, is giving it away for free.
Pretty much.
Now, all the questions you reviewed.
But it's in your rate, that people outside the village are paying their fair share.
Prior to that, for the longest period since the village bought the water system, it was paid only by village taxpayers.
Mhm,
The
correct.
operation and maintenance was offset with a higher rate for people outside the village, but it was, the debt service was not. The debt service was owned and burdened by the taxpayers on the tax roll.
And it's going, in most cases, when you dissolve the village, a district is created, the debt stays in that district.
But you said it may not.
There's always an opportunity that towns have the ability to do.
And all our questions during this process, and the online process, are gonna be answered by your group, online, in writing,
Mhm.
every question is answered. Are you planning on getting a written statement from the DEP stating that the contract from 1924 agreement between the town of Hunter, village of Tannersville, and town of Hunter is going to go on in perpetuity with no charges?
We're attempting to, I can't guarantee we'll have it.
So will you at least articulate that I did not get in writing from New York City that they will uphold operation and maintenance in perpetuity, the wastewater treatment for free for the people around this wastewater
We'll
treatment.
either have an agreement or we won't have an agreement.
Well, if we don't have an agreement, the operation and maintenance of the plant is $5 million a year.
Oh, it's millions, millions.
So that would might do something to our tax rate.
Correct.
And you would have to consider.
Yep.
In this consideration, did you know about the grants? We got this solar grant for $500,000 during a DRI, during the last administration. And that's going to reduce our current burden on our taxpayers by about $70,000 a year
Mhm.
for 20 years guaranteed, because it's warranted. So that, is that gonna be in your calculations? And on your staff, the credentials are,
I've been doing this for 30 years and Kathleen's.
no,
been
your
doing it for 30
credentials
years.
as a municipal accountant, or as a lawyer, or as,
Kathleen's a
And
former,
32 years of municipal management.
management, but not a,
I was a budget
CPA.
officer for a county government, $300 million budget.
Are there gonna be CPAs involved? Will there be other attorneys
No.
involved?
no,
So it's based on Laberge,
it's based on
and from
our,
there, it's up to people to decide, and they can dump it, or they can actually bring in the petition anytime they want, and say, we're done with this, let's get it to the vote, or, so there is no official CPA, bar association, and/or official licensure of any state agency that license you in respect of bar association, certified public accountancy. So typical consultants, which is fair enough, nobody's disparaging your qualifications, but there is no legally binding agency or official status that can revoke your license or indoor, if things, let's say, not misappropriated, but let's say things like the mayor said, like the 97 agreement, or the sewer, nobody can come after you if things fall to pieces after.
no.
So you're free and clear. Okay, that's fair enough, thank you.
Next row. Sure.
If there's a no vote on the dissolution, and then there's a joint
Consolidation.
consolidation, does that kick in that same short time?
Any
period?
petition starts automatically the short time frame of 10 days certifying the petition, 30 days calling for a vote, and 69 days having a referendum.
Okay.
And you're not required to have any study or any plan to vote on it.
So what if it was instead of a public initiative, would it be a vote by the board and the village to do the consolidation?
Well, they're two separate pieces. One of them is a board initiated process where both boards can do this, or citizen initiated. The
So
residents.
it would take both boards could apply after a no vote for dissolution. Both boards could come together with a proposal for consolidation.
They could,
And then that would kick off a similar process
correct.
we're doing now, it doesn't have a.
Correct.
But there's the village of Hunter, which complicates that.
Absolutely does
So
complicate
you wanna
things.
explain that?
So, well, you can go in, how do I say this? A village cannot exist outside of a town. So consolidation is challenging because they're not part of the consolidation. I've never had a situation before where I've had no village in New York State and town in New York State is actually consolidated. So that would be the first time. How it impacts with two villages, we're not fully sure. In the village of Paulding, there's only one village and one town, the only ones that actually vote on consolidation. There are even some theorists that say that the law doesn't actually pertain to villages and towns for consolidation, but that'll probably get shot down. So if you were to consolidate, you have to deal with what happens in the village of Hunter, because there's still going to be a village. So the village of Tannersville and town of Hunter can consolidate into one, but you still have the village of Hunter. The village of Hunter can also choose to consolidate with the village of Tannersville.
Or God forbid. You kick them all in prison.
We got enough headaches.
So this row, any more questions on this row?
Given the current situation.
Neither was I.
This is probably like a super basic question, but is this purely financially driven for the village? That, for financial reasons we're considering?
No, so my understanding, I don't want to speak out of turn, is that there was a petition almost ready to be served, which would kick off a very, very tight time frame of, again, 10, 30, and 60. So the town said, the village said, wait, there's going to be a petition being served, why don't we take a step back and look at it and give the residents more time to develop a plan and understand what the impacts are. Understand what DEP's issues are, understand what the water issue would be, understand the employee concerns. So you're able now through a board initiated process to spend more time to develop that plan. So I can't say it's financial, I have no idea why someone started the process or why, but this is a board initiated process to give the residents more of an opportunity to develop a plan and have something to vote on. So we have the opportunity to work with DEP. We have the opportunity to understand what the impacts of the grants are on your taxpayers. So to me, I would love to change the law. I've been arguing this for about 13 years now. The law is flawed. In Ben's world, Ben's world only exists in my head. In Ben's world, a petition should start this process. It should not be able to have a vote without having a plan to vote on. Now, the Governor Hochul passed a law last year to create a village, you have to have a plan. So why is it to dissolve a village if you don't have to have a plan? So that's why I wish it was reversed. I wish if you did a petition, you start this. You can't. So in Ben's world, the village is deciding to say, hey, let's give our residents more of an opportunity to ask questions. Let's let the consultants have the opportunity to learn more about the community and about the different issues affecting our taxpayers, so they can provide better information to people. So that's why we're at this point. This road.
Oh,
We'll come back to this road. You
quick
didn't
question,
ask
just a
me.
quick question about how was this petition started in terms of like numbers of people that you said it might have been?
So in New York State, you need, for your village of your population, 20% of your registered voters to sign a petition. In New York State law, and on our website, there's a link to the state reorganization pamphlets that say how you go about doing a dissolution. There's an actual petition that has to be created. So we, the undersigned residents of the voting registered residents of the village of Tannersville, hereby request, and I'm paraphrasing, the village of Tannersville put forth in the referendum the question or not, shall the village of Tannersville dissolve? And there's actual formal language in there that says it better than I just said. And then you have to have the resident, the address, and you go through and assign petition like you do in politics when you run for office. And then your resident has to sign the cover, gets submitted to Robin. She then has 10 days to certify those people they are alive. Be a registered voters and see a registered voters in her community. And if there's 20% that meet that, they go forward.
But 112 people did that.
People.
Couldn't do that.
Oh, could have. In walking, you need 85.6 and 86 times. So they went forward. So that's the process. Ms. Rowe, any questions? We haven't answered yet? Sir?
Yeah, I just want to clarify the consolidation. You mentioned a few moments ago that if a consolidation resolution emanated from the village,
It can't by itself.
yeah, and the town together,
Yes.
that they had to also grab the tail that's wagging the dog in Hunter?
We're not sure.
Can they or must they?
We're not sure what happens to the village of Hunter in a consolidation in a town that has two villages. It's never happened before. So we'd have to do more research on how that would impact. What I'm saying is the town of Hunter and the village of Tannersville boards either have to do a joint board resolution to begin it on both sides, or the residents of the village and the residents of the town have to pass, do a referendum to start it that way.
And I would assume that such a plan would contain the detail. There would be a plan, just like the dissolution process
It
we're
depends.
talking about. And if
It depends on.
that plan
Sure.
goes down, doesn't pass, coming out of the dissolution initiative, then a consolidation appears, then they have to recruit Hunter in order to join that? You
We
think?
don't know how it's gonna work in the village of Hunter yet. So let's just focus on the dissolution. That's what we're working on right now. And go through this part. Because we don't know how a second village handles it.
Then lastly on that, if the dissolution plan is involved, and come fall, it fails to pass in a vote, then the dissolution advocates with the petition in hand cannot submit that
Correct.
for at least 4 years.
Correct.
And can they submit that with the very same signatures they collected last week?
I personally believe that we have to go ahead and do a new petition in 4 years. Okay, there's a statute of limitations in there, you can't just go ahead, and they don't even go out for even residents anymore at that point.
Okay, it's not the hammer waiting to fall.
No, 4 years, start the process all over again. The process is dead for 4 years. Now, you asked about a consolidation plan. You only have an actual legal consolidation plan to vote on if it's a board initiated. If it's a citizen issue, there is no legal full plan. Some communities do what's called an interim study of dissolution or interim study of consolidation, as much as you can get done in 60 days. But that's not an actual full plan that meets the letter of the law in Article 17A.
All right, so we think for a consolidation issue, it would require 3 boards.
We're not sure, again,
Awesome.
but
I know you're not
you're
sure.
trying to peg me into an answer, and I don't have an answer. I have to
I have
work
a
with
village
the
question.
Let's go to the next
And the other
one.
town.
Let that run, man.
Listen, I'm trying to-
I wasn't at the last meeting either. So
Just saying.
what, I just wanna understand, what would Hunter, the town of Hunter have to gain if we were to dissolve?
It's none of their, they do not
They have
have,
nothing,
well, honestly,
yeah.
their stuff, the town of Hunter is responsible for providing services that they weren't provided before, with no vote in the process.
Okay.
Okay, so this is pure, that's why Wade said, this is a town issue, not a village issue. But the village is the only ones that vote, it's a flawed process,
Okay.
it's a flawed law.
Okay, so you mentioned that somebody, that they heard that somebody was gonna serve a petition. Who was gonna serve a petition?
No, it's out of my context, doesn't even matter.
But you're saying the board heard.
It was throughout the community, everyone knows there was a petition being circulated.
Yes, there is. I got a question for you. Can that petition right now?
Sir, I want to keep answering your question, but I want to make sure I go to everyone.
Oh, no, I'm just gonna dump on it, take 1 second. If that petition would drop right now on this desk and say, let's go to a vote, it would have to go to a vote. right?
That's up to somebody with a black robe, not me.
Okay.
Because there are a number of flaws in this law that were not thought of in 2010 when they created it. So many issues have to be, if that came up, we go to court. And because the question in law is, it says that the dissolution process can be initiated by either a petition or a board. So the question of what does, I don't want to sound like what his definition is, but what is the definition of initiated is? So if, in my world,
I got it.
you start the process as a board, you can't get a petition. But someone with a black robe may choose differently.
Thank you.
Continue down this line, and then I'll come back forward. I want to make sure I get there.
Was this process started by the village board?
Yes.
Okay. So, you're saying there's a lot of legal issues that would have to be worked out. So if the plan was to save money, it sounds like this, and the litigation would be paid
Or any litigation post-dissolution, any cost post-dissolution, stick with the legacy issue that gets created, which is the village.
This is getting, you know, we're wasting the time.
Here, yes. All, it still stays here, and this is a huge fear, and it's fear mongering at its best. Grants secured by the village for the purposes that the village, that the grant was provided, stays with the people. The town, though, becomes the executive. So they're the ones that have to sign the agreement, and then the whole process, everything still stays with the people that do it. The town's not getting a gear on it.
But they,
No.
so it's whatever they said, whatever.
Yes, so the governor, excuse me, everyone. Hello, guys, I know you're all rowdy, I know you want to get going, I have a lot of questions, and we'll keep going, we'll keep using our forum, and, but it's still a question, and I'm not explaining myself very well, and I apologize. Your grants are your grants.
They stay here.
They stay here for the purposes for which you were secured. Your DRI is a commitment from New York State to the village of Tannersville for $10 million, it's really only 9.7, but $10 million. And the strategic investment plan now is approved, and the grants that were, the projects that were selected by the governor are still the projects selected by the governor. The town, or county, or God himself, or herself, have no say over changing that. The only thing that changes is the mayor is no longer the executive, you can't sign it anymore. The supervisors now, the town board are the ones that sign it. Your grants are still your grants. They're not being taken by the town. Your water is still your water. Your sewer is your sewer, we'll deal with DEP, or not deal with DEP, try to get DEP be involved. But you would not even be able to talk to DEP if this was a petition. The because it's, again, you're voting before the process has even begun. So having the luxury of doing a board-initiated process gives you the ability to coordinate with DEP as much as they will coordinate with you. It gives you the opportunity to figure out what the change of your tax rates in the numbers is gonna be with your solar. What are you gonna do with the upper limit? What are you gonna do with the grants coming in through DRI? What are you gonna do with the housing pieces? What are you gonna do with your laws? What are you gonna do with your zoning? What are you gonna do with your equipment? What are you gonna do with personnel? That's what we're gonna be doing over the next 6 months. But there's no fear mongering, and town's not here to take it over. In fact, in most cases, towns don't have to do anything.
The town is on our side, by the way. Mr. Mahoney does a great job, I have to say that, and we're not buckle.
I'm gonna continue to go down this road. Sir, I'm sure there's a seat over here if you want to get the last word.
I have to stand up for the town.
Life's kind of a twofold information. Something that seems to be getting away from this group tonight, you guys are here by the village as a consultant.
Correct.
It's your job, with no interest in the village, to gather all this information to give to the taxpayers of the village of Tannersville.
Correct.
And that, with that said, you had your list of talking to the village people, talking to the town people. Are you gonna be talking to the taxpayers as well, to get their opinion of what they either know or don't know about how the village is run?
No. We're not gonna be talking to every taxpayer in the village. We're gonna hold the Q&A session online sometime in May, June. We have the FAQs for questions coming to us, so we'll provide that back. We added the meeting into the online meetings, so more people have the opportunity to continue to ask questions. It'll be a longer period, only 1 hour, we'll just do it 2.5 hours, make sure your questions are answered. But I'm not going to everyone's house and ask them their opinion.
Taxpayers are not going to the website, yes, make questions.
Correct.
And then
You should have been a Budweiser. 25 next week, but again,
It's the same excuse. I wanna see numbers.
Also, taxpayers are welcome to contact their board members because they're your representatives. And the taxpayers are also welcome to participate and speak at public meetings when there's the opportunity to do so. So, taxpayers should not feel that they're being cut out of the process. Am I right?
right, they can talk to every village board meeting, submit questions, they can submit information.
I had two things that I was thinking of when a couple of people were speaking about a couple of roads. They kept talking about things that, and you mentioned many times in your presentation about things that you're going to work out with people and research and come up with a plan. But the bottom line is that when we go to vote for the plan, essentially what we're doing is we're jumping off a cliff and we're hoping that the town catches us. And catches us the way that we want to be caught. So all the things that you're doing, like saying, okay, we're gonna have, the new highway department will have 2 more employees or 3 more employees or whatever. That's our plan, but that may not be the town's plan. And I think the danger of a dissolution over the consolidation is that it's not a 2-way conversation, a negotiation, it's not something that's being built together. We're coming up with what we want, and we're saying, give it to us, we pull the lever and jump off the cliff, and we hope that they catch us. And to me, there's a lot of unknowns, and that's very scary, and I'm sure it's scary to a lot of people.
It's very scary.
Because there's things that we enjoy as villagers, that, village life, and things that we need to continue in order to maintain the village life that we have. And they may not be the priorities of somebody who lives outside of the village. And being completely reasonable, they may just say, well, I don't think that that's something we need anymore. But because they aren't a villager, they don't have the same perspective.
Well, this process is you individually as residents get to choose, and I know we're running out of time. You get to use this process to weigh together your values as a community. You weigh the services you get for the cost you pay, and determine whether or not this solution makes sense with an S or sense with a C. If you're saving oodles and oodles of money, that's one thing. If you're not, that's another thing. But you have to determine whether or not it's worth it. So in most cases, the last 4 cases we did, it came out to be about $1 a day. I have no idea what yours is going to be yet. We haven't even got the numbers yet. So in the last, let's just say in Walken, they decided that saving $300 a day, $360, wasn't $365, but almost $1 a day was not worth losing their services. In the village of Lake George, the big king, they want to save 30% of their budget, it was their parking fees. They made $3 million a year in parking fees. And as a village, that money goes to your general book revenue, you can shoot interfund transfers, they can pay for part of the wastewater treatment plant. But as a town, they can't do that. As a town, they can't take parking revenues and put it towards a wastewater district. So the village residents were losing $3 million. Now, wait a second. Every village employee has to become a town employee, because you don't have anybody doing this work. So all we're saving is the 5-member board, and the mayor is gonna stay on as special events coordinator. So I'm saving 4 people and maybe 1 clerk. But I'm losing all control, I'm losing all my money, and it doesn't make sense to them. So they voted no. In South Nyack, they voted yes, because they had outside issues affecting the village for development pressures for the college that was sold. They were afraid it was gonna change.
Oh, absolutely.
It was gonna change the complexity of the makeup of their community forever, so they chose to dissolve into a town that had more of the resources to fight that kind of a potential change. Everybody's different. Mastic Beach, they couldn't afford to be a village. They weren't properly funded, they didn't properly budget, and they were already in debt. In 3 years, they were in debt. So everybody's different. When we finish our plan, you'll be able to individually look at and weigh each of the pros and cons and make your decision if there's a vote, before the voting booth. If there's not a vote, you'll still have the information to make your decision. So I know you have a 6:30 meeting starting.
We have one other question here.
12 minutes ago.
You jumped over. Quick question. The CETC money that the town gets, roughly $480,000 roughly.
Right.
70% of that would go towards the town of Hunter taxpayers to reduce their taxes.
Yeah.
Does that have an expiration date on it? Is that good for 1 year, 2 years?
So the law,
10 years?
the law says it's in perpetuity. So every year it gets re-upped, just like your state aid does, your CHIPS money, your school run, every year in the budget. But like anything in the state, a law can change and they can decide to remove it. That being said, it has never been brought up. Every single year, including COVID year, they got their money. COVID year had a 15% reduction. The next year they got it back. Everyone had 15% reduction. No one knew what was happening during COVID, but they got the money back the next year. So there's always fear mongering that says it can be removed. Like any law, it can be abolished, but it's a drop in the bucket of the entirety of the New York State budget. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it back over. Please.
Any questions?
No.
This is.
It's 6:30 was the next meeting.
Next meeting was planned for 6:30-ish for the plan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And isn't this more important to the village to ask a few questions, rather than your board being 5 minutes late, when I don't think it was publicized, it was 6:30-ish?
It was publicized.
It was publicized.
He's gone around and asked everybody's questions.
How about the assets of the village that is sold off, and the capital reserves? Because everyone has
These
village
questions,
residents, but half
he's
the people
gonna,
are
you're
town
gonna answer
residents,
these
not village
questions.
residents. Who gets that check? Does that check get sent to us? Does it go away? Or if they decide to sell the truck, sell this building, sell the resources, where does that money goes into a pot? Does it get mailed back to the taxpayers? Or,
This is all part of the study.
Well, it is all part of the study for the
there's really no
number of-
time for the study. There's an online presentation, and there's the final one, which you'll be saying, let's end this quickly, and then it's gonna go to a vote. I think this is a little more serious.
Guys, stop. Just stop.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm not playing between you two.
Right.
I'll answer a question. Stop. If you want an answer, you're gonna be respectful. I don't know who you are.
I don't know
Doesn't
who you are.
matter.
I know, I asked a simple
Okay, so
question. I
stop.
just wanted
Mayor
to
asked
answer.
us to continue, but I'll answer the question. In a dissolution, a district is, the area formerly known as a village, is they create what's called a legacy district. It's a taxing entity that receives and expends the money left over from the village. So what happens is any capital reserves, any money left over for the sale of assets in your disposition goes into this escrow account. That account then gets used to pay off any village debt. So if you have any water debt, if you have any park debt, if you have any building debt, any debt you have, general obligation that the village residents have taken on, gets paid out of that escrow account. When that's all done, any leftover monies can go back to the village residents. So town of Brookhaven, after a year, gave every resident in the village, and that former resident of Mastic Beach, $150 check because they had money left over. It is not the town's money. It stays with the legacy district. Now, that being said, there are long-term costs that the village has in employee health care. So your legacy district will be paying for that employee health care until, to be nice, the employee health care is no longer needed. So everyone's passed. So all outstanding liabilities, lawsuits, anything that the village has indebted on is paid by that escrow, that legacy district. If there's no capital reserves left, if there's no money in that escrow, then the town levies a charge annually to that legacy district for those additional costs. So if this gentleman worked for the village and he had 20 or 30 years in, whatever the agreement was, and he has health care at 80% until he passes, you're all paying for that until he no longer needs it. So that's what the legacy district is. It's meant to create an opportunity that any money that's yours is yours. Any liabilities that's yours are also yours. Any new questions before we go? You haven't asked one yet.
I have a very light question. How many town supervisors resign after the?
It's not a fun process for towns because some towns are set up with water and sewer department and staffing, and some are not. So because the towns are not the ones that actually promulgate this for the most part, they are saddling us. I can't tell you to resign, but it is a big process. Last question.
Will the depth of the financial analysis that you're doing go deep enough to show things such as what you just explained to the gentleman here about like the retirements and the things that we will have, will be on the correct records or full.
Until no longer, yes, the financial analysis gets proven out.
And that'll be part of what the public learns, so that we'll understand there, it's not like you can just dissolve the village and walk away from any debts we have.
No. No. As far too many people think it's simply turn the lights and off the keys. You're still responsible for the debts you incur. They're yours. So the town will create a tax entity to pay that down.
And then the town has to administer all that?
The town has to administer it. It's all the town's responsibility. Because it's not committees. The village is going to be using work groups. And as I tried to explain before, the work groups are going to be of the people doing the work, the department heads and the village of town. So that they're able to find. Right, so go find, so the DPW, who has to be in charge of taking over DPW services, has to be involved in the conversations of how would they do that? So that we know, okay, I need X amount of people, I need X, Y, Z equipment, I need all this. So that's why it's there. Okay, I'm not, so as the gentleman in the back said, we're unbiased, when this is done, we're not here anymore. I have no dog or no pony in the race, so to speak. We just have to work with the village and town to come up with a dissolution plan based on the data that's provided and what we unearthed and what we were able to get with DEP, and give that back to you all, and you all can make your decision. You can have committees that are pro it all over the place and arguing in the public, you have those that are against it, politicize it, that's not us. We're simply providing the information that we can. We decided to add another meeting so that the public had more questions that we can do it. We can do it from their homes. It'll be 2.5 hours long. Answer more questions. We'll have more information so we can actually have more informed responses. Right now, we can only provide responses on process. We'll have more responses on substance before we have that meeting. That way, you have more information, and then you continue going forward. Go.
Thank you.